Okay, hello everybody. Today we are going to talk about the salt flush. Now, disclaimer here, the salt flush is not approved by anyone. This is not a Dr. Wallach protocol. This is something that I actually made up. And it actually started from a miscommunication. Pharmacist Ben Fuchs told us to take 1 teaspoon of salt in a glass of water and that it should taste warm and soothing and improve our digestion. We did a tablespoon and realized it was quite easy and felt quite good. And after dealing with many dozens and then hundreds of people, I realized that a lot of these average people with many health problems could easily drink the 1 tablespoon. So I started to increase it. Now I've fallen back on a baseline of 3 tablespoons, even 3 heaping tablespoons of any salt, but preferred natural salts like Himalayan or sea salt. But I know that many people who are very sick or have very serious digestion problems, or people who have been taking stomach acid suppressing drugs like proton pump inhibitors or even Tums, or even people who drink carbonated drinks with meals which suppress stomach acid, those people can probably drink a lot of salt, meaning more than 1 salt flush, and they will probably get the most benefit from it. So the salt flush has become part of my standard protocol. And it's been part of my standard protocol for a long time because it's one of the easiest things that anyone can do without buying anything extra, because they should have salt in their home. And salt is very cheap anyway. So they can do that without committing to a supplement program or a diet change, and it's one thing that can immediately improve their life. Any good farmer would provide their cows or horses or goats with a salt lick, a trace mineral salt block, and that would prevent them from eating weird things like leather gloves and the handles on tools or the wood in their barn, because mineral deficiency causes cravings, and salt in particular causes cravings. This is a large part of the reason I believe why people are eating so much junk food in general, because all junk food has salt in it. Even the very sugary things like soda, candy bars, and processed food in general. Okay, so what is a salt flush exactly? It's really just a thick, salty glass of water. I like to standardize it to 3 tablespoons. The glass could be 8 ounces, it could be 16 ounces, but I don't recommend going over 16 ounces. You don't want that much water, you just want salt. The idea is to get a lot of salt in this glass, thoroughly mixed. And not to drink a whole bunch of water, because if you drink too much water and salt at the same time, you could vomit, you could throw up. But that usually only happens when there's a lot more than 3 tablespoons. This is one reason I cut it down to 3 tablespoons. I've seen people drink 10, 15, 20 tablespoons at once, people who are extremely deficient. And when you start to have that much, you can get bad reactions. Not life-threatening. I've never seen anyone go to the hospital or anything like that. Never heard of anything like that. But they could definitely have diarrhea, hence the flush. Right? They could definitely be running to the bathroom. They could have a headache after, either right after or a few hours after. And if they're one of those people that could drink like 10 or 15 tablespoons of salt at once, they could even have a flu-like experience for 24 or 48 hours. They'll just feel really sick and tired and be in bed, basically. And that is why I cut it down to 3 tablespoons. And if you do get any of these reactions, it's still worth it. You should feel much better on the other side of it. So if you feel crummy that day or the next day, it's definitely still worth it. And it's only the people who can drink a lot of it who are going to get any sort of side effect. But they're also going to get the most benefit from it. If someone can only take a few sips, it's not going to change their day at all. They're not really going to feel better at all. But if you're so low that you can drink half the glass, and it does give you a headache, when you wake up the next day, you probably will feel better. And if it basically made you sick for a couple of days, you should also feel much better at the end of that, especially if you're staying hydrated during that, just like if you were regularly sick. Rest, heat, broths and soups, liquid foods, taking it easy. You should feel much, much better on the other side of it. And if you can drink the entire glass, you want to do it again the next day or the day after, because you haven't fully topped up yet. This is the point. If you can drink the whole glass, you are not topped up on salt. If you can only take a few sips and it's really, really, really salty, then you're topped up. Your body is telling you, I have enough salt. That's where you get the repulsive feeling from. But people who can drink half a glass and they're topped up should still do it again in a couple of days. And repeat it every few days until they can only take a few sips. And by the way, even if you can drink the entire glass of 3 tablespoons, you're still not very likely to have one of those uncomfortable experiences mentioned earlier. You might run to the bathroom, but that should feel real good. It means there's a lot of stuff that wanted to come out, and that flush is a very beneficial thing. If you can only drink a few sips, you're probably not going to get a flush at all. Probably nothing is going to happen. That's great, you're topped up on salt. We've ruled that out as a problem for you. There's really not that many other side effects to be concerned about. A lot of people ask, well, isn't that much salt dangerous? Well, no, because your body will not let you consume more salt than it needs. You're not injecting it into your veins. You're putting it right into the body through the mouth so that your body can tell you when it has enough. And it will tell you exactly when it's had enough, when it's repulsively salty and you can't force yourself to have any more. And this is also why we don't recommend doing it in capsules. Some people ask, can I just put these in capsules and swallow them? You don't want to do that. You want to let your body's taste tell you, I've had enough. And if it tastes really good, that's your body telling you, you haven't had enough yet. When you put too much on food, you can't eat it anymore, but you have to taste it. And this salt flush could also be called a salt test, because we use the salt flush for 2 main reasons. The first is to top the person up on salt, but the second is to see how deficient they are, how big of an impact salt has been currently to their health problems. Because if they can only take a few sips of the salt flush, then that tells me that they are topped up, and then that just means it was a salt test, and probably nothing will happen, because they weren't that low. And this could be done first thing in the morning, by the way. It probably is better to do it on an empty stomach, but you can do it anytime. And actually, you can do the salt flush anytime if you do have stomach pain or you overeat a meal. It should definitely help soothe your stomach. It might even stop the pain completely. And you'll probably be able to drink a lot more of it when you're in stomach pain than otherwise, because your body's really craving that acid component to break down the food. So the point of the salt flush here is not to force yourself to drink the whole glass. But I've noticed that doing it in real life with people, they can usually drink a lot more than they think. Often a person, because they've never drank a really thick glass of salt water before, they'll take 1 or 2 sips and say, oh, that's really salty. But the instruction is to take small sips, and I usually tell them, just like a personal trainer would at the gym, they would say, you do a couple more push-ups. They might even yell at you and say, do 3 more, 5 more, or something like that. And you're more likely to do it than you would have on your own. Maybe you plan to stop at 50, but they got you to do 65. It's kind of like that with the salt flush, because a lot of people are very timid about it. So when I encourage them to keep taking small sips, usually they can take a lot more small sips. And in real life, I look for their face to really change. I look for their mouth to straighten out into a straight line and their eyes to squinch. That's the point where it's become really repulsive for them. And it's usually a lot later than when they originally thought, oh, this is salty. If you have chronic stomach pain, acid reflux, indigestion, heartburn, it should taste really soothing. It should taste warm and soothing as it goes down. And we expect those people to be able to drink either a lot of that glass or the whole glass, and they should definitely repeat it every 24 or 48 hours until they can only take a few sips. That's where a normal person should be at when they wake up in the morning and they tap a little bit of salt into their water. It should taste mildly salty because we wake up dehydrated, so this should help hydrate us, but we shouldn't need to do an entire salt flush. Part of the reason for doing the salt flush is also to teach the body to crave salt directly in the water, or in the coffee, or in the tea. A lot of people like myself use salted butter in their coffee or tea. Because when we start craving the salt in the water, a lot of times we can skip the junk food that we were using as a vessel for salt before. We can just tap some salt into our water and get rid of that salt craving rather than eating a bag of chips or the candy bar. So I didn't really get into the mechanics of why salt is so good for us. It's not really what this video is about. Salt is extremely important both for the sodium and the chloride, but this salt flush is primarily about the chloride. It's about using that chloride as the component for stomach acid, which is mostly hydrochloric acid. And the salt flush isn't strictly necessary to get a person topped up on salt, but if they could drink an entire glass or half the glass, they would have to be putting a lot of salt on their meals over the long term, over weeks and months, to actually get topped up to the point where a salt flush can do in 1 day or 2 days or a week. And there's very few things that will get rid of stomach pain as effectively and quickly as a salt flush at any time. And I've found that the salt flush over the years, especially doing it with real life people standing there right in front of them, I can't tell you how many people who have told us that it basically changed their life. And once they learned about this salt thing and they started using salt on their food, so many things improved. And we were doing this at our store, by the way, in Windsor, Ontario, and often we would see people walking by us in the mall, walking down the hallway, who looked really bad. They looked really dry or really gray, just really decrepit people. We would try and coax them over, and one of the first things we would do for them is make them a really salty glass of water. And often you could see the life come right back to them. You could see some color come to their cheeks pretty much immediately. And if you think about it, if you went into the hospital in really rough shape, they put salt right into your veins, basically doing a salt flush IV. And that's if you go in fainting or dizzy or nauseated, or with heat stroke, which is essentially severe dehydration. You need salt to be hydrated properly. This is why sport drinks all have salt in them, and other electrolytes like potassium. Even sugar is an electrolyte, a water-soluble nutrient. So it can immediately prevent dehydration and heat stroke. And I actually got heat stroke once, and a super thick, salty glass of water brought me back to life without a hospital. And on top of these immediate benefits, a strong stomach acid is required for the absorption of several key nutrients, including calcium, which I would say might be the single most important nutrient in the body. It requires a strong stomach acid to be chemically primed for absorption. We could go on and on about these types of relationships to salt and the rest of the 90 essential nutrients. The other 88 essential nutrients will not work properly without sodium chloride. The fact that natural salts also have a small amount of other trace minerals is also excellent. And this is an essential component of any kitchen and any diet. And in my experience, the people who try to eat the healthiest tend to neglect salt the most. They think they are putting enough salt on their food by putting a few shakes of the salt shaker onto their meals. It is nowhere near enough. I have seen numerous people consume an entire salt shaker easily. That's what the salt flush is all about. Realizing how far behind we are, topping that up, making sure that that is not a problem going forward, so that no matter what we're eating, no matter what protocol we're doing, if we're doing a digestion protocol or we're just taking our 90 essential nutrients regularly, we want to make sure that we're topped up on salt at all times, and to make sure that before you even start the program, no matter who you are, we tell you about the salt flush. I just want to make sure that that is completely scratched off the list. And if they come back and they say that they could only take a few sips of it and it was really completely offensively repulsive, I say, well, that's great. You don't sound too far behind on salt. To wrap up this video, I just want to emphasize that you might just be turned off because you've never done it before. This might just be your conscious telling you that, oh, this is too salty. I encourage you to continue taking very tiny sips of this very salty mixture beyond the point where you think it's initially repulsive. If you do repeat this, chances are you'll have an easier time the second or third time. Your body will be tempted to take a little bit more. It will realize that it's not a big deal to do so after the first one. I'm just saying there's a lot of people who have told me, oh, that's way too salty, and then I know that their face hasn't involuntarily straightened out and winced. And once you do get to that point, you do know you are fully topped up. If you can drink a lot of it, repeat it the next day or the day after. If you can still drink a lot of it, continue doing it. But if you are taking proton pump inhibitors, or you're still taking Tums every day or something like that, something that lowers stomach acid, drinking sodas all the time, you're going to continue craving salt at an abnormally high level because your body is craving that raw material to make stomach acid. If you stay on the proton pump inhibitors, it will prevent your body from making stomach acid. no matter how much salt you take. So you can do a salt flush every single day. It's not going to fix the digestion because the drug is stopping digestion. I cannot tell you whether to take a drug or not, but I can tell you that there's not any real withdrawal concerns to a proton pump inhibitor, and there's also no real point in weaning because it will work at low doses, and in fact it will continue to work even if you stop it cold turkey. It will still work for a few weeks most likely. This means that people who are getting off of proton pump inhibitors at their own voluntary choice, because it is their own voluntary choice to take any medication or any prescription from any doctor. Your doctor works for you, and you can choose whether to take their prescription or not. And if you are getting off of it cold turkey, you will probably want to do a salt flush every single day. And you'll be wanting to use more salt than normal on your foods. And you'll also want to be going mostly on liquid foods for those first 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks even. Like juices and broths and yogurts and things that are easy to digest, like fruits, especially fruits with enzymes in them, like pineapples and papaya. And you can talk to us about this, by the way. You can email us, you can message us on Instagram, and in future I will make another video just on getting off of proton pump inhibitors, but that's the gist of it, and we will walk you through that. But know that salt is your best friend when you're doing this, because your body is going to be craving so much of that to make the stomach acid. And now you will be able to hydrate properly because the rest of your electrolytes should work correctly when your stomach acid is working correctly. So any electrolytes that you are consuming, electrolytes such as salt, B vitamins, vitamin C, other minerals like calcium, potassium, magnesium, phosphorus, and so on. All of your electrical nutrients now and your electrical body should work much more properly because of the primary electrolyte of salt. And when the human body is working properly, or the animal body is working properly, and it is consuming enough salt, it should be telling you through a hunger and thirst for it exactly how much it wants and needs. And something should taste too salty when you've had enough, and you won't be able to consume it comfortably. And if it really has too much, you won't be able to eat it or drink it at all. Your body has had enough, it becomes too salty automatically, but it tastes good up until that point. So that's your salt meter. You got to learn to get in touch with it. Doing the salt flush is one of the ways to get in touch with it faster. And maybe you will be one of the many people who have had their lives changed by the salt flush and by using more salt in their life in general. So I think that's about it for now, guys. I appreciate you. Until next time. My newest book, Everything You Should Know About Healthy Blood Sugar, goes into a lot of detail about one of the most complicated things we get asked about, which is healthy blood sugar. This covers all of the blood sugar problems you know about, including type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and other problems you might not know were blood sugar problems, including behavioral problems, sleep problems, and cardiovascular problems. This book also goes into a lot of detail on digestion and how primitive people and animals actually acquire the nutrients that they need for healthy blood sugar in their natural environment. And definitely check out my book, Fake Diseases. It covers all of the major topics that come up, like birth defects, blood sugar problems, bone and joint problems, cancer, autoimmune problems, and more. And it's on Amazon for just $9.99. Definitely get yourself a copy of Dr. Wallach's cookbook. This is basically a textbook about how to cook without the bad foods, particularly oil and gluten. This is 300 pages stuffed full of recipes without the bad foods that they're usually made from. And of course, make sure to check out our food page, Notice Foods, that's on YouTube, and at Notice Foods on Instagram. We have a lot of content up there teaching you how to cook without the bad foods that Dr. Wallach describes, and Dr. Glidden's 12 bad foods, all of that, all of the rules that you need to know. And we have experienced chefs and bakers who will answer the questions in those inboxes. And all of my books, audiobooks, and links are available on my website, noticebooks.org.